Hello, my name is Paula de la Cruz-Fernandez, and this is an interview with Mayor Harvey Ward Jr. for the Gainesville Business History Oral History Project, run by the Inquire Capitalism Program of the History Department at the University of Florida. Understand that for us and for the public, the information you're providing is a gift, and it is an incredible historical resource, and we dearly appreciate it. This interview will be available as part of UF Oral History Collections and through UF Digital Collections, and also on YouTube.
Okay.
Could you please introduce yourself with your full name, and if you can please spell it for
Sure.
us?
Harvey Ward, Harvey Ward, Mayor of Gainesville.
Thank you. So I'm going to start asking you about your kind of more personal background with business. If you could start telling us a bit about maybe early memories of Gainesville as a business community, maybe, some examples of businesses that you remember going, things like that.
Sure. So I was born in 1967, so my early memories of Gainesville as a child probably date back to sometime in the early 70s. I'm always dubious about whether things are memories or suggestions, but that until you reach a certain age, you never really know. I don't remember things that lots of folks claim to remember, because they're part of our shared oral history of Gainesville that most people didn't actually live through, who are still with us. So by the time I have real memories of downtown and of our shopping districts, the downtown business corridor, the businesses like Baird Hardware, McCrory's, and businesses like that I'm willing to believe were downtown, where Bo Diddley Plaza is, they were gone. I mean, by the time my earliest memories are of what at the time we called the Bicentennial Plaza, which is now Bo Diddley Plaza, and we called it the Bicentennial Plaza because it came to be around 1975, 1976, thereabouts, and so downtown looked with other than the addition of a few hotels and things like that, looked very much like what it looks like right now in my earliest memories in the mid-70s. Where Harry's is right now was a furniture store when I was a kid, and there weren't a lot of other businesses, certainly not retail businesses or restaurants for the most part, in the downtown area. The Gainesville Shopping Center was thriving when I was a kid. There was a Belk Lindsay at one end and Publix at the other. And now the Publix lives where Belk Lindsay used to be, and Belk Lindsay is entirely gone. There was still, when I was a kid, a JCPenney location where Vivid Music Hall is now on University Avenue. And Wilson's Department Store existed probably until the early 80s. There's some county offices there now, as the corner of Northeast First and University Avenue. And you can still see the Wilson's brand in the front door of those county office buildings. The Gainesville Mall was relatively new and thriving when I was a kid, and at 13th Street and 23rd Avenue, with the anchor store being Sears, which I am told left downtown to be at the Gainesville Mall in the late 60s or so. And the cool thing about the Gainesville Mall was you go to Sears, and then there was an escalator that took you down one whole floor to the rest of the mall. And that was fun. We didn't have a lot of escalators back then. There were, like an ice cream store and record store and a bookstore, the standard 70s and 80s mall things were in the Gainesville Mall. And at the far end, the north end, far end from where Sears was Moss Brothers department store, which I think was probably a Florida-only chain of department stores, maybe a little more upscale than Sears. And they had, I remember the Suncoast restaurant there, which sounded very classy to me at 7 or 8 years old. And I would go there with my grandmother sometimes. And across the parking lot from there, where I think there's a party store or something like that now, but not in the same mall building, was Morrison's Cafeteria. Morrison's was great. I mean, it was the food probably was not good at all, but it was an interesting experience. And then in the late 70s, probably 1978 or so, the Oaks Mall opened, and that was a big deal, of course. Much, much smaller mall than it is today, although it's shrinking all the time with UF Health taking over big chunks of it at this point, with JCPenney at one end and Belk Lindsay at the other end. And the downtown or near downtown Belk Lindsay managed to live for quite a long time after the Oaks Mall opened, probably until I'm guessing late 90s in its North Main Street location. So it's interesting that managed to survive for a good long while after most of those department stores had moved, if not to the Gainesville Mall, all the way out to the Oaks.
How this kind of big transitions, like to big malls and things, how do you think were experienced by perhaps smaller businesses, kind of more family, less chain businesses?
So there were certainly almost no mom and pop businesses out in the Oaks Mall. There were probably a few in the Gainesville Mall, but not really. They're mostly franchise or chain businesses. There was a local clothing store that had several iterations that was in the Oaks Mall through the mid 90s. And that might have been the only one. I mean, maybe a couple of restaurants, but definitely a couple of restaurants that I don't think were part of chains, but those were the exceptions. I mean, malls have never really been the structure of malls, and the fact that they want to be as cookie cutter as possible means mom and pop local businesses really just aren't part of that scene.
Right. What about supermarkets? Because there are some supermarkets that seem to have lasted. Words, I'm thinking.
It's basically one. Yeah.
Speaking of it, but so how was that? What was the experience of going to the market, and how did that change for you and your family? And
so when I was a kid, we already were using primarily chain stores all over town. There were perhaps different stores.
Could you say the names?
Sure. Big Star was one of the supermarkets that my mom frequented. They had a couple locations, one of which became at some point famous in a later iteration as Skeeter's Restaurant on Northwest 13th Street, where the Second and Charles bookstore is now. That location at one point was a Big Star grocery. And there was also a Big Star out near where Royal Park apartments and all of that is now. But there was in East Gainesville, there was an IGA store where one of the auto parts stores near Waldo and University is now, an Independent Grocers Association store, which felt to me like a chain because I saw IGA signs in other cities, so I assumed that was a chain. It wasn't actually a chain. It was part of a kind of a brand, but it was the Independent Grocers Association.
Right.
And then down the road from that, where UF Health has a facility now at a little north of the 300 block of Waldo Road, was a Thriftway supermarket. For a long time, my grandmother insisted on shopping at the IGA, and my mom always shopped at the Thriftway until she decided there were better deals at the Big Star. So, whatever. But Thriftway was a chain as well. So it's, I think by the 70s, most of the local supermarkets or local groceries were mostly gone. What is currently Ward's supermarket used to be, prior to that, was Norman's grocery. And then it changed sometime in probably the 80s, I would guess. I don't know exactly when, but really there was never going back nearly 60 years, there was never a real plethora of mom and pop grocery stores in Gainesville. The truth is, I did some work on this recently, total tangent to all this, but chain grocery stores exist because the U.S. stopped enforcing the laws that came out of the 1930s, antitrust laws. When we stopped enforcing antitrust laws around the grocery industry, that was the end of mom and pop stores for the most part. So every city in America talks, and every small town in America talks about how much we really want small groceries to thrive. That's not going to happen until we start enforcing the laws, which are still on the books, about antitrust. That's a tangent to all this, but that is the reason that very few independent groceries really thrive. It's a competition issue. Those we still had a few in the 70s, a few local clothing stores. There was up through the late 80s, early 90s. Jimmy Hughes Sporting Goods on University Avenue was where middle schoolers and high schoolers went to get cleats and jerseys and things like that. It was retail, but it was not going and buy the coolest new thing. It was, here's your list of what your high school football team says you need to buy on your own, or whatever your club basketball team has. You went to Jimmy Hughes to get all that. And that succumbed at some point to pressure from the bigger athletic chains, including Athletic Attic, which was one of the original athletic store chains that was in every mall in America for a while. And the headquarters was here in Gainesville, and one of the early investors was Steve Spurrier in the 70s and 80s.
That's interesting.
Their corporate headquarters used to be on 23rd Avenue, across the street from the old Coppers facility. And that, faded. Like, businesses have a life cycle, and it's hard for us to let go of businesses sometimes. But the truth is, a business has a life cycle just like people do, and a much shorter one. And sometimes, yeah. And it's not necessarily that they couldn't compete, or that they were forced out or anything like that. It is often just that, the people who owned it and started it got what they needed out of it. The community got what it needed out of it, and it was time for things to change.
We've talked about downtown and probably more like West Gainesville. Can you tell me a little bit more about East Gainesville, since you also...
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in East Gainesville, and it certainly, it was never, a huge economic center. It was never a center of wealth, but it was a place that regular middle class folks could do all their shopping, and it was a standard neighborhood that had all the things you would need in standard neighborhoods, a collection of neighborhoods, I should say. There were bank branches, there were home improvement stores, and of course groceries, and all those sorts of things. And East Gainesville is mostly devoid of that, and that is a result of first of all, the Oaks Mall becoming the center of gravity for business, and also money following that. All the private money followed west. You can really draw a straight economic line from when I-75 opened through Gainesville in the late 60s, early 70s, to the placement of the Oaks Mall, and it was like a vacuum cleaner, just bringing all the commerce there. I don't think it was ever any, intentional, we're going to starve East Gainesville out sort of thing.
Right.
But when money starts leaving faster.
Mm-hmm.
And there were multiple restaurants near. I lived 1520 East University Avenue, very near what they call 5 Points now, Hawthorne Road and 15th Street and University Avenue. The tackle box was there, and actually my grandfather built the building that the old tackle box was in. Tackle box is one of those things that it's a litmus test to see if you have been in how long you've been in Gainesville. Everybody from who has been here longer than since about 1990, you could say the tackle box, and everybody knows where that is. It was a geographic pinpoint for folks. Anybody who came after about 1990, you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say the tackle box. It was at that 5 Points area where the city of Gainesville has a kind of a garden and geographic feature there now. And but it was a tackle box, a fishing supply store for people on the way out to Noonan's Lake on either University Avenue or Hawthorne Road, and also kind of a corner grocery, served multiple purposes. So that existed there. The old Doug's Dairy Twirl, which became Fast Eddie's, which is now Fast Eddie's Liquors, after being vacant for a long time, was across the street from the tackle box. There was an In-N-Out, not the California In-N-Out chain, but an In-N-Out Burgers there, which is now a chicken place. And there was a Max Drive-In there. The very earliest versions of Skeeter's were within a block or so of right there as well. A little bit further down Hawthorne Road, there were at least one, maybe two bank branches. There was a Winn-Dixie through the 90s, which is now the sheriff's office. The main Alachua County Sheriff's Office's headquarters is in that same building as the Winn-Dixie was in. A Food Lion and they became a Food for Less, I think, or maybe it's the other way around, which is vacant now, of course. On Waldo Road, there were, the Thriftway I talked about earlier, grocery store. There was further out toward the airport. There was a Lowe's, and there was a West Supply, which was very much like Lowe's, but was a little more contractor oriented. All of that existed and thrived through the 80s.
Right.
And then by 1990 or so, almost all that was gone. So the 70s, early 80s, there was plenty to do in East Gainesville. Monero's Restaurant is a famous one. Again, that's probably, instead of the 1990 marker, probably more like a 1980 marker. Anybody who'd been around before that, no matter what part of town you lived in, you knew about Monero's Restaurant on Hawthorne Road. An Italian restaurant that is long gone. But people who've been around for a while will remember Monero's. But again, all of that disappeared as money started to flow. I won't just say west, but west to the mall area, and eventually to Butler Plaza as well. I mean, Butler Plaza is now one of the most dense shopping locations in the southeastern United States. People come from a long way around to shop at Butler Plaza. People in Gainesville like to pride themselves on looking down our noses at Butler Plaza, but people not from the interior of Gainesville come from a long way to go to shop at Butler Plaza. And that is a tremendous revenue source for the city of Gainesville, and I'm proud of them. They've gone from absolutely nothing. It was a vegetable stand on the side of Archer Road, and a small private airfield, not really an airport, but an airfield, Stingle Field. I do remember going to the circus at Stingle Field once when I was very small. That's pretty much where Whole Foods is now. And that really has just boomed as the vision of first Clark Butler and then Deborah Butler. I mean, it's pretty rare that the kind of business vision of a family becomes the kind of success story that Butler Plaza has become. I I don't like a lot of big box shopping personally, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I was actually there this past weekend looking for some things that I couldn't find otherwise. And again, that is really a success story of a family's business vision that has stayed true to Gainesville and not just taking their money and gone somewhere else. So there's a lot to be admired about how that has worked out.
Yeah, there's a student in the project actually doing a study of the Butler Plaza, and she's trying to meet the Deborah. So wonderful. So do you think, so you talked about the 80s, if you could think more recent of any other moment as important as Oaks Mall opening, and that has either led to declining of a business environment in East Gainesville or something else, besides not too close to COVID. We'll talk about COVID.
Gotcha. So we are, in the late 80s or 90s, I guess. Thornbrook popped up as someone's vision of what a little shopping village should be. I don't know that it is exactly what anybody ever envisioned, but there are a number of mom and pop businesses there, locally owned businesses, as well as some chains, that in many cities would otherwise be downtown. And it was very intentionally envisioned to be a little shopping village that has, I think, worked out very well. Not everything thrives there, but there's a specific kind of business that works really well there. Now, I bring that up to say that is part of the reason that downtown Gainesville doesn't have a lot of small retail that you might see in other places. It's a 15-minute drive to Thornbrook. It's a 15-minute drive to Butler Plaza. And we have a thriving downtown in many ways now, and really for the last decade or so, with the addition of the Hampton Inn and now the Hyatt Place. There are three economies. I know this wasn't exactly your question, but the downtown has this weird experience of three thriving economies all in one geographic spot. There are people who work downtown during the day in office jobs at places like City Hall and have lunch here and there's a little bit of retail, but primarily it's an office / legal / government / lunch economy. That's kind of an 8 to 5 sort of thing. Following that, starting in around 4:30, 5 o'clock, people come downtown for dinner or for a show at the Hippodrome or for something at Bo Diddley Plaza or something like that. So you've got this economy that only happens between 4:30 or 5 and 8:30 or 9. And then around 10 o'clock is the big booming economy, the really booming economy of students and nightclubs. And all those things work. I mean, they're all their own separate economy, sort of. And the city then has to figure out how do we knit all that together, because they're really not the same folks partaking in all three usually.
Sure.
And all three people who are really into one of those three generally are not even aware the others are happening because they're not part of that group. And we don't have what a lot of downtowns traditionally have had, which is retail in these spaces. I'd love to see that develop, but that just that's not where we are right now. I will say that the biggest changes to this part of Gainesville, the downtown, have been the addition of those two hotels. And really, as much as people talk about, oh gosh, all these big buildings are going up downtown, they're not going downtown. The only two big building projects, big building projects in the last 15 or 20 years downtown are the Hampton Inn, the Hyatt Place, and the new courthouse. So there's not a lot of living spaces being built downtown. we do see that going forward. I think between First Avenue and Second Avenue Southeast, I think you will see some new residential opportunities go in there very soon. But that hasn't happened yet. I mean, there's a surface parking lot that's been there since way before I was born, and continues to be a surface parking lot that I'm hopeful will not be a surface parking lot soon. We also see, as you go farther east, as nondescript and common as it is to every community, it has been a real benefit to the city of Gainesville for a Wawa to open on East University Avenue.
Right.
Wawa is, I mean, there's a Waffle House at 9th and University, and then almost next door, next to the old Coke bottling plant. The Wawa is a real gathering place, and strangely enough, almost a banking center for East Gainesville, because there is an indoor ATM there. There are very few ATMs available in East Gainesville. So that one almost always has a line of people at the ATM. You don't see lines at ATMs very often, but you see people in line at the Wawa ATM. It's an interesting, I mean, yeah, it's a big corporate thing, Wawa, but people love Wawas, and people hang out at that Wawa and just chat. It's become kind of a corner grocery where you see and be seen. So that's been an interesting thing to watch. But as you go farther east, we just saw in the last 6 months a contractor supply and home improvement store open in a building that has housed a furniture store, secondhand furniture, I think. And when I was a kid, it was a feed store. It's been many, many different things at about the 1400 block of East University Avenue. That has really been the biggest, other than the Walgreens kind of near there, one of the biggest investments in business in that part of town recently. And when I say recently, over the last 20 years. The city of Gainesville, Alachua County, and UF Health partnered to open the UF Health Clinic farther out on Hawthorne Road recently. And real proud of that it's not just an urgent care clinic. It was originally supposed to be just urgent care, but UF Health really listened to the neighbors and built it into something that serves far more needs. City of Gainesville is about to open, we'll break ground beginning of the year on a transit hub on the same property. And we hope to be able to attract a food hub and that sort of thing in that spot. With the idea that if the city of Gainesville spends money there, if we spend public money, private money usually follows. I'm trying to be very careful not to let private money follow in such a way that it creates displacement. But that is often a natural thing that follows public money. So we're trying to do this very intentionally. But we know that private money was not going to go on its own, that we had to make public investments, and we've done that at the Cornerstone / Eastside Health and Economic Development Initiative property on Hawthorne Road. We are about to spend, depending on how much it ends up costing, somewhere around $70 million between the city and the county and the school board at the old Citizens Field MLK area on 8th Avenue and Waldo Road. Again, with the hopes that by spending public money for very public purposes there, high school football stadium, community pool, upgrades of all those things, a brand new fire station, by upgrading all those public amenities, that private money will hopefully follow. But that all remains to be seen. We'll start doing some demolition on the existing older buildings there that aren't salvageable, and breaking ground on new things beginning of 2026.
So that's great that you're talking about policy and investment from the public sector. What do you remember from before that have been tools that have created really good opportunities for business or not?
So we have three really interesting things. And unfortunately, none of them are in East Gainesville proper, but three little mini business neighborhoods throughout the urban core that have thrived in the same time period over the last 15 years or so, 10 years really. Some with almost 100% public money, some with zero public money. And the three that I'm thinking of are the 4th Avenue Food Park, which is on 4th Avenue between about 3rd and 6th Street. That has really just taken off. Part of that is public investment in infrastructure on 6th Street and on 4th Avenue. City of Gainesville money flowing into that to try to make it a better place to be. But partially the Larson brothers just building out, starting with Opus Coffee in an old strip mall, 2 old strip malls, entirely abandoned and not places you wanted to be even in the daytime for a while. But they've turned that into an absolutely thriving food park with multiple restaurants there. It's hard to get near it during lunch hours because everybody wants to be there. And that is just a huge success. That is a partnership of some public money, but primarily private vision for what that could be. Between that and the Dick Mondell's across the street and just a variety of things happening around there, that has become a thriving place to be from, again, somewhere that was forgotten and left behind. So really proud that has thrived. Innovation Square, just a little bit west of that, between 6th Street and what about 10th, I guess. Almost exclusively through investment by the state of Florida through UF, with partnership for infrastructure from the city and the county. There's so much more that can happen there. So sometimes it feels like it's not succeeding, but it is succeeding. I mean, the UF Innovate building, the hub there, it has a waiting list for companies to be in there. It's full. Across the street, the other UF investment on the north side of 2nd Avenue, where there's an Opus Coffee and Campus Credit Union, and that has really taken off. It's a great area to be, the former Alachua General site, basically. And it is attracting businesses. It is growing businesses here. I've had 2 meetings in the last week with startups who are trying to figure out what to do next because they have really thrived in that space. And now they're almost in a position where they need physical room to expand and they need capital to expand. And we're trying to figure out ways to make them want to continue to be right where they are to grow that kind of business in Gainesville, to grow that startup business so we can have some corporate headquarters here instead of just being all, a colony of a variety of corporations in many ways. So that is a almost exclusively public investment that was intended for economic development and is succeeding in that way quietly. There's another little boom area that is succeeding entirely on its own without any support, any intentional support at least from city or county or state, and that is the Grove Street neighborhood on 10th Avenue between about 4th Street and Main. That has exploded, and it's really the vision of just 1 or 2 people again who said, we've got some older buildings here and they're affordable and we need to be able to figure out what to do with this neighborhood. So now it's got everything from from video game arcades to places to get your hair cut to a brewery and an unbelievably thriving Monday evening farmers market that is just a blast. And so there's live music there. There's multiple kind of food hubs in the area. And again, all of that happened because of the vision of just a few local entrepreneurs making a space where it feels good to just be there and be a part of it, whether you're at a restaurant or or at the Cypress and Grove Brewery, or any number of little retail shops in there. There's a record store. There's lots of great local restaurants there. That's thriving. Mm-hmm. Each one of those little mini economic development sites happened in entirely different ways at essentially the same time, and they're all working. So I'd love to be able to find a way to figure out what makes those work and duplicate that all over the city. We're hopeful, actually, that we'll be able to do some of that coming up in the Duval neighborhood, specifically on the 8th Avenue corridor, east of Waldo Road. The city of Gainesville has made a commitment to a $2 million business improvement grant in that area that we're just getting started on. There's a whole lot of information still to come on how that will roll out, but I'm hopeful that will help make that the next boom area.
Yeah. Do you remember of any other before the 90s, of any other kind of hub like that booming?
Not really. I mean, so prior to that, I think it was mostly either legacy, sort of downtown sort of thing, or very intentional building a shopping center from scratch.
Right.
And I think that's, the kind of the way things worked in most southeastern cities, most post-World War II cities. That's what you did. You said, hey, we have this big green space here. We're going to build a shopping center. And there is a formula that either works or does not work with that. Again, as we see with Butler Plaza, that is a thing that is a formula. But these ones that just kind of happened, like Grove Street, I don't know that there's a way to duplicate it. It is a moment in time, and it's working.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the university and the students. What do you think? I mean, of course, it plays a big role in Gainesville being what it is. But have you seen waves in that? In like maybe also the kind of businesses that have opened, but directly related to the university.
So again, the downtown late evening, nighttime nightlife is not entirely students, but mostly. Students find their way downtown to be part of a social life. Whether that's downtown proper or what we at some point started calling Midtown. Until like 20 years ago, nobody used the word Midtown here. I don't know where that came from, but fine, whatever. It's descriptive. You see waves of as tastes change, you see different priorities by students for how the businesses they want to patronize. And it used to be that there were thriving, and I remember the kind of the tail end of this, thriving businesses from campus all the way down toward about 6th Street on University Avenue. Clothing stores and restaurants and things, drive-ins and things that were primarily student oriented. And the rest of the town could, use those, but they were there to serve students. And that really died off in lots of ways, even before the last decade. I mean, it just kind of emptied out. And you saw some reuses, but mostly they were not reused to their original capacity. The things that are thriving student bars and restaurants are going to be that way. But we have seen, as people have built, as land use code changed to allow taller buildings near campus, the city of Gainesville requires some level of ground floor retail, and that is slowly gaining momentum, but it takes a while for those to fill up.
Since when is that law? I mean, requiring. So
that goes back to probably the mid 2000s. The Prior to then, land development code made it really hard to build any tall buildings near campus, which meant that students who didn't live on campus were likely to live in apartment complexes west of 34th Street.
Right.
That's not natural. That doesn't happen in other university cities. I mean, the idea that you're going to live 3 miles from campus is not sustainable economically. It's not sustainable environmentally. It doesn't make any sense. But that's how our land development code was written by the people who wrote it in the 1950s and 60s. And so, development of 2-story garden-style apartments just thrived in the Southwest, west of 34th Street, until these changes to the land development code allowed taller buildings to be built near campus on University Avenue and 13th Street. And those changes to the land development code happened right before the real estate crash. So when the market crashed in 2007, 2008, there was no money following the change in the land development code to build those things. But the momentum was there. And when money started to flow again in the real estate industry, they started popping up. When those land development code changes were made, the city required ground floor retail instead of like a parking garage on the bottom floor, something that felt like a city, that felt more urban, to be able to bring in more businesses to that area. Now, most of those buildings, to get the loans that they had to get the loan agreements, required long-term 10-year leases for those retail spaces. Mom and pops don't do that. So it takes a while for them to start to fill in. I was actually just this morning very carefully looking at a lot of those, and they're filling in. Finally, they're whether there's a new bagel shop in one of them. They're ice cream. I think they're ice cream stores. I mean, they have all kinds of weird names. I don't really know. I've become very old all of a sudden, but they're filling in. Students, generally speaking, today don't shop the way students did even 10 years ago. It is so easy to, if you see an ad on TV or on your phone for something that you think you might want to purchase, you can purchase it right now and it will be at your door in 12 hours. If you see that ad at midnight, it might, the thing you order on Amazon or wherever might be at your door when you wake up in the morning. Yep. So you don't then, particularly students, younger folks, very young folks, don't say, oh, tomorrow I'm going to go to the store and buy this. I'm going to buy it right now, and it'll be here before I can even get to the store tomorrow. And that changes the way people shop. I think probably, many millennials and Gen X and boomers, we want to go to the store. But that is not the case for younger millennials and Gen Z. So cities like Gainesville, we don't see the same retail business that some other cities do that don't have the percentage of young people that we do. And I've followed how that works in other university cities, and it's a common trend. I mean, it's not just a Gainesville thing. To some degree, Gainesville's always suffered from that because if you are in grown people do shopping in their own town. Students, particularly if Gainesville wasn't home before they came to UF or to Santa Fe, very often do their grocery shopping and their clothes shopping and other things back home. So you go home to visit your parents over the weekend, and you come back with a car full of things that mom bought you over the weekend. Whereas if you're in Gainesville all the time, and this is home, you want to buy things here. But a significant part of our population, as is the case for Athens, Georgia, and Knoxville, Tennessee, and Tallahassee, and every other big college town, people don't always buy all their stuff in Gainesville. So that changes. It gives us a different retail environment than Ocala, for instance. But our hospitality sector, on the other hand, the bar restaurant industry, as well as the hotel industry, thrives far more in university cities than it does in places with an older population.
What other patterns do you think are there in university towns? Like maybe like higher turnaround, like businesses just last for that even not that generation, but that class of students.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and that is not. A lot of folks see that as, oh, these new buildings, they've run everybody out. No, there was always turnover in those old buildings too. The buildings that existed where the Standard is at University and 13th, what was there before then? There was a bookstore, Gehring's bookstore, that was there for a long time, right on the corner.
That's right.
But that was displaced by a Starbucks before the Standard was ever built. Just north of there, where there was Target Copy and those Burrito Brothers, and a couple of generations of us loved those businesses, but they weren't there forever. I mean, there was something there before them too. And just a little north of there, the little shopping complex that had, I will really date myself and say Eckerd's. And a Subway and Maui Teriyaki was in there, many other restaurants and things. There was a little Greek letter store in there and things. That building was well loved, but it was a huge piece of crap. I mean, that was a poorly built building. It flooded every time it rained. There was kind of a half story below grade. Yeah. And every time it rained, it flooded. And businesses would kind of cycle through there. There was always, seemed like there was always, Eckerd's or CVS. That was sort of the anchor. But lots of other things cycled through there because we do go through businesses often faster than cities that are only grown people. So you don't often see the at least for the last 40 years, you don't see a lot of family-owned clothing stores or things like that. That used to be the case. I mean, Silverman's was a multi-generational fixture downtown. But as our downtown has changed, you lose some of those things. Now, of course, Eileen Silverman runs Eileen's over in Thornbrook now. So the family business goes on, but it's changed significantly. The look of the store and the intent of the store. And that is, in many cases, just the world moves on, but it is also that students' tastes change, and that generation of students is here for 4, 5, 6 years and then not. And then it's a whole different group that comes in that wants different things. Yeah.
If there was a story of a business or a business person or family that you think that it should not be untold in the history of Gainesville, what would that be?
So
or many. There would be many.
There's some really cool, so I mentioned Eileen Silverman. Her father had, and her parents had Silverman's downtown, which I don't know if it's changed names again or not, but for a long time was the Silver Q. It was a pool hall, because Silverman's was written in the sidewalk in front of the entrance, so that the bar, when they took the building over, used that same motif. But she, because she grew up in the clothing industry, went on to open Eileen's in Thornbrook. An interesting, I mentioned earlier, early iterations of Skeeter's. That's a wild story. I mean, that guy was interesting. They opened a little facility, a little restaurant in East Gainesville, near University Avenue, Hawthorne Road area. And not too long after that, in the early 80s, maybe late 70s, I guess, I couldn't put a date to it, took over, an old or an existing grocery facility, a supermarket, and turned it into Skeeter's Big Biscuits, which is famous for people who were in town in the late 70s through the 80s. 24-hour diner, basically, that it was wild. I mean, if you had to experience Skeeter's. It was famous for its big biscuits, a biscuit the size of a plate.
Okay, wow.
And the Asher special, which was hash browns with a couple of eggs on it, basically. But it was great hangover food, really tremendous hangover food. But Skeeter's attracted, over the course of being open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, lots of different kind of crowds. I mean, you'd get a lunch crowd, you get a legit breakfast crowd, maybe a little dinner crowd, and the late night crowd, which was wild and really, really interesting. I was a student when Skeeter's was thriving, so I have fond memories of it. But they had live music most of the day. In my memory, they had live music all the time. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how I remember it. And they had for at least part of the day, and definitely in the late night, in addition to your basic Southern diner food, they had an Asian food buffet, which is just the weirdest combination of stuff, but it worked for Skeeter's, and it was terrific. And then they overextended a little bit to open in a building downtown. I want to say it was I'm going to get the number wrong, the 235 or 230. I'm going to get the number wrong, but it was across from the Firestone building downtown. And they opened another location there that was a little, upscale is the wrong word, but a little more downtowny. And it was hard to keep both open. It didn't have quite the charm, I don't think, personally, of the 13th Street Skeeter's. And eventually it cost more to operate that than the one on 13th Street, and 13th went under. And the downtown one went on for a little while. I think they had some locations in other places for a short time. But also, Asher, the guy who started it, was at least an early investor, if not a constant investor, in the Cafe Risque chain. And opened a strip bar in Micanopy and other places. And there were all kinds of sordid stories around the Cafe Risque chain, as well as the whole Skeeter's chain. And people should go read up on that, I would just say. All kinds of interesting stories, business stories about that. But Skeeter's as an actual restaurant really thrived for a solid 10 years or so, and as a legend lives on for people of my generation forever. Things like that are just always it's cool the way that works. Now that 238, by the way, is the address of the other one. And I say that because it was known for a while afterwards as the 238 building, as the city of Gainesville tried to figure out what was going to happen with it. 238 West University Avenue. Before it was Skeeter's, it was 8 or 10 different bars. I mean, just hardcore, just basic bars, including in the mid-70s. I first remember it, not that I was there, I was a kid, as Nichols Alley, and which was kind of a disco, I think, such that Gainesville ever had a real disco. Followed by the Islands, which was a really popular live music venue. Lots of bands who came through Gainesville played there, as well as at Florida Theater, kind of catty-cornered across the street. There are always legends about, Tom Petty and a few members of the Heartbreakers showing up impromptu doing shows at the Islands. That was the kind of the early 80s. There was an iteration of it that was called Lone Star, which when the cowboy bar trend was big around when the movie Urban Cowboy came out in like 79 or 80 or something, it did that. But in the mid 80s, for a short while, it was this very strange place called Gator Bumpers. And it was a bar. I don't think they had a full liquor license, but they sold a lot of beer. And it was also a bumper cars basketball venue.
Mm-hmm.
So you could drink a couple pitchers of beer with your friends, and when the next round of bumper car basketball was open, you could strap into a bumper car like at the fair, and had basketball teams. There were hoops, but it wasn't exact. You weren't shooting basketballs. You had like a highlight cesta, and you would fling the ball toward the goal. I don't think we were supposed to drink while we were on the Gator bumper floor, but it was the strangest, weirdest bar ever. But it was in that same 238 venue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and I don't know how long that actually lasted. I think Skeeter's was probably the next thing that opened in there, but I'm sure I've missed something in that venue. But there's a long history of interesting places being in there, and it was built to be a car dealership. It was initially the first Shaw and Keeter Ford showroom before Shaw and Keeter Ford moved to North Main Street, along with every other car dealer in town in the early 1970s, probably.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting corridor.
Yeah, I think every town has and I don't know why it works out this way, but you end up with a strip that is for car dealerships. And Gainesville was no different than everybody else. We had all the major brands were all represented between 23rd Avenue and 39th Avenue.
Yeah, they still are, right? So
mostly, yeah. I mean, it's the big dealerships are out there, but people buy cars differently than they used to, also. So
true. Before we go to COVID, could you mention Asian buffet in this place? What about
Skeeters?
Skeeters. Can you tell me a little bit more about I'm not going to say non-American, but ethnic, diasporic communities that have established their business here?
Sure. I mean, Gainesville always, because of the University of Florida, has always been a melting pot. And we've always had just a variety of different people from around the world who come here primarily as students or as faculty and staff at the University of Florida, and bring tradition with them. And you want somebody, some group of folks with a shared background will come, and before you know it, seeking opportunity and seeking comforts of home, somebody will open a restaurant that appeals to that group. And we've never had a little bit of everything, but we've often had just really interesting chains, not chains, but just restaurants that pop up that you wouldn't expect. And we've had for a long time really great Asian food in Gainesville. Mr. Han's was a long time more upscale Asian food out. I was going to say out by Red Lobster, but they outlived Red Lobster. So good on them. Although I miss Red Lobster. Mr. Han's was always a really interesting place. And it's got to be 50 years old at this point.
Yes, around there. We want to interview.
And there were a couple of other Asian restaurants that were starting, I don't ever remember some of them not being here. There was a place on University Avenue that was had been around for a long time as an Asian restaurant. I mean, I was going to say it's relatively new, but it's not anymore. La Tienda on Southwest 13th Street kind of opened to support people who were here doing migrant construction work in a lot of cases. And became, in the late 90s, early 2000s, a place to go to get really authentic Mexican and Central American food. And it was authentic because they were feeding people who were first generation here to do construction work, not only in Gainesville, but surrounding communities. So it was a great place to be introduced to authentic Mexican food because the people it was made for were authentically Mexican. And that happens, a fair bit around town.
Yeah, the case of also Cuban food, right?
Right.
Like with Miapa and
Right.
La Aurora and all those places, how it really supports now all the kind of Latin American, or, well, I mean, they're already American. I mean, they are first generation Americans too, but they miss Miami and all that. And so,
so there was a restaurant sandwich place on Southwest 16th Avenue, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but every morning, early in the morning, the owner would drive to Tampa to pick up authentic Cuban sandwich bread from a baker in Tampa and be back here in time for the early lunch crowd.
Yeah. And now they have their own kitchen. And exactly. So just to kind of wrap up a little bit, the COVID crisis, like between the financial crisis and COVID, and so what things can we learn, or can the city, perhaps policy, learn from those experiences?
So lots of things, but specific to business, I will tell you that if it had not been for the Biden administration bringing in American Rescue Plan and a few other things that really were, the biggest economic investments in cities, specifically in cities, since the New Deal. I mean, literally, the biggest support of urban living since the New Deal, specifically so that we did not crash. We would have crashed. The city of Gainesville used 25% of our ARPA funding to support nonprofits in the community that had that were likely to go under. Groups that were out there doing work that saved lives, and they continue to save lives. We were able to support them because we had this money from the federal government that kept them able to thrive. Peaceful Paths, Grace Marketplace, Episcopal Children's Services, and lots of much smaller nonprofits are still with us today, saving and changing lives, because the city of Gainesville was able to appropriate those federal funds to keep them in business. Without that, they wouldn't be here. And there would be a big missing piece for Gainesville. There would be lives that would not have been saved had it not been for that. A lesson that every community should take, and we see it again now, although it's not a pandemic or any sort of natural disaster, it's a entirely human-made disaster. We have to depend on each other. We have to rebuild networks the way that people were used to them before my time, long before my time. Things work very well when we can depend on international networks working. When you make an order for your business and it shows up on the time it's supposed to show up, and there isn't some enormous tariff attached to it and all that kind of foolishness. But we can't depend on that anymore, unfortunately. So a lesson that the pandemic taught us a little bit, and is being reinforced right now, is that we've got to rebuild those local networks, local businesses, local banking, whether that's credit union or however to put it together, local lending and local savings. I think it's incumbent on us to learn that lesson, because we can't always depend on everything working the way it's supposed to, for no good reason. But we have the capacity to do that as well. To do more local agriculture and to do more local business in general.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you think of another story, like a Skeeters, that you can share, that would be fantastic. But thank you so much for this interview.
Of course.
It has
You're
been
welcome.
very informative and great.
Absolutely. Okay.